I'm Jay-Z.
I'm Daniel.
And this is Just My DIY.
And we're here today to show you how to take an old record table like this one, which is literally on its last legs,
and upcycle it into something modern and fun using one of Daniel's favorite things.
Coffee!
Coffee. Lots of it.
Oh, wait. There's some left for the morning, right?
So there's a lot to do. Let's get started. What? This is what we're starting with, my mom's old record cabinet, and it needs a lot of work. First, we're going to update the outside by adding some wood veneer, and then we're going to use a homemade coffee stain to stain that exterior.
We're going to stabilize the structure so that maybe it'll hold up for like another 40 or 50 years.
We're going to replace the bottom of it because it has warped over the years due to the weight of records, which are actually quite heavy.
It's a burden that someone must carry.
A table.
With a not warped bottom and stable legs.
And finally, we're going to add a pop of color on the inside to have a nice little modern flair.
On this inside.
And that inside too. All right, first things first, the coffee stain. This is our first time trying to make a coffee stain, and we're actually going to try two different methods to see which one gives us the effect that we want for the record table.
In truth, this is her first time making coffee.
It is. I don't like coffee.
In order to create our first half of the experiment, where we mix coffee and water, something you can probably actually drink, but we're going to stain with it this time apparently.
Mm-hmm.
And to create an after-the-fact oxidation effect, we're going to mix steel wool and vinegar and allow that its own brewing time.
So this is going to be a two-part application where we lay down the coffee water stain first and then oxidize it after the fact. And then
we're going to try another thing we found on the internet to do, and that is to mix our steel wool with coffee and vinegar into one vessel
for an all-in-one oxidation effect.
Be sure to let the vinegar and steel wool mixtures breathe. Bad things happen otherwise. We used a paper towel to cover ours. And luckily, we started another batch last night, and it's ready to go.
The paper towels came in handy when straining out the solutions. On to the test. On the left is just our coffee and water. On the right, the three-part solution. You'll see very quickly that the three-part solution turns dark so fast. The coffee and water, when we applied the vinegar solution to it, also ended up turning pretty dark. This wasn't quite the result we wanted, so we tried to add a layer of coffee on top of them both to see if we can get more of the brown tones out of it, but that didn't quite give us the result we were hoping for, so we tried again. This time, just coffee on the left, tiny bit of vinegar in the middle, and on the right, we started with vinegar. As you can see, as we keep going through this test, that just a touch of vinegar, meaning a few seconds, gave us the brown tones that we wanted when topped with some coffee.
While Jay-Z was testing the stains, I went to work taking the table apart and cutting the new pieces. We used a circular saw on the track guide to cut the bottom piece out of plywood and do a quick sand on the edges, and then cut the tracks for the sliding doors using a couple of passes with a circular saw. We cut the doors out of the thinnest board we had in stock, but they still required a good sanding to get them thin enough. Thank goodness for a random orbital sander.
We're ready to move on to the next phase.
Applying veneer to our external surfaces, these being our sidewalls, over there being the top, and some version of a veneer slant. What did you call that again?
It's like a chevron pattern that we're going to do on the doors.
On the sliding doors on the front.
Yes, which we're going to figure out as we do it. Before we could apply the veneer, I gave the tables a good wipe down with a water and vinegar solution to take off the decades of, well, stuff, and then a quick sand with 150 grit sandpaper to give the slick sides some grab.
This is the first time we worked with veneer, and it was surprisingly easy. We just had to cut the pieces using several easy passes of a sharp utility knife. We cut them slightly larger before applying, and then trimmed them once they were in place. We ironed over a piece of tin foil with the iron on cotton setting to adhere to the veneer, and used a rolling pin in the direction of the grain to smooth it out. Then, we put the body of the table back together.
It's literally the 11th hour on this project, but
we're near the end.
Little did the Just Might DIY team know, they were nowhere near the end.
now what we need to do is paint the inside and stain it. Now, we did a bunch of stain tests, which will give you the up close on. We decided that the ones with the vinegar and steel wool that soaked overnight were way too dark, so those are definitely out. And we are going to go with a light vinegar and SOS application on top of the coffee stain, because that gave us the rich brown that we were looking for the body of it. For the chevron patterns on the doors, we're actually going to use a combination of all the ones you see here. So, are you ready to start staining and painting?
I don't know. I could use some coffee.
Oh. There you go, honey.
Thanks, darling.
Oh, no. To give the table a pop of color, I painted the inside with latex paint and a foam roller, but used a foam brush to hit the edges. Then, the staining began. We went with a two-part application method, starting with several coats of the coffee and water mixture. We quickly discovered that the veneer hadn't fully adhered in a couple of spots and started to bubble. No worries though, we'll show you how we fix that later. The plan was to leave the vinegar steel wool mixture on only a few seconds, but it took longer to get to a good stopping point than I thought. It turned super dark with a bluish tint. Not what we wanted. So we made a command decision to sand it a little bit and then used a combination of the heat gun and pressing to mash all the bubbles out that had formed. To bring back the brown tones, we hit it with a thin layer of pecan stain, which really brought out all the work we had done with coffee and the vinegar solution.
Once I learned what a chevron pattern was, we cut the strips of veneer with 45-degree angles on each side. We made sure to vary the direction of the grain, as well as the thickness of the pieces for added effect.
We stained these before applying them because we wanted to keep the colors really separate. We were using 3 different staining methods on this. The first was just 4 layers of coffee. The second was this time using the few second touch of the vinegar and wool solution. And the third was actually letting several of them get super dark with the vinegar and wool. The water-based stain on the wood turned them into little curly cues, but they naturally straightened out a bit once they dried.
We marked the 3 guide points on the board, and then went to work lining up a few pieces, ironing only the tops and continuing until the full row was partially attached. We ironed them down the rest of the way once everything but the corners was in place. The utility knife came in handy to even out some of the spots that were off. We continued on like this for all 8 rows across the 2 doors. We left some of the overhang and cut it exactly to size once all the chevrons were in place. We had already decided to reuse the old hardwood, so we used the old doors as guidelines for the placement of the handles and drilled out the holes. You'll see that we drilled from the front so that we didn't have a tear off of the veneer.
Speaking of the handles, they needed a good cleaning. We soaked them in a water and vinegar solution and then used a wire brush to make them almost just like new. Next up, legs. The legs that were originally on the table are
More fake than the 1970s they came from.
The whole decade wasn't fake. The 70s were amazing.
And super.
Okay, we're going to agree to disagree on that. But yeah, so the legs aren't exactly the highest quality. They are plastic, and we just decided to take the opportunity to upgrade the legs. But we couldn't find anything readily available in this 10-inch size, so I am terrible at a kick line. So we did find these at our local hardware store, and because we're trying to get all of this done on one day, they're going to have to do. We are going to cut them down to 10 inches and then just kind of round off the edges a little bit and fake the gold with some spray paint. So it's time.
Yeah. We quickly learned that wasn't going to give us the result we wanted. So we stole the real wood MCM legs off another piece we have waiting for an upcycle. They fit the record table attachments perfectly.
Their color, however, wasn't perfect, so I sanded them down and scrubbed their hardware clean before applying layer after layer of coffee stain. Attaching them was super easy. Once it was up on its legs, we sealed the table with a coat of polyurethane and then did the same to the doors.
And now, we really are veneer the end.
Yep, just screwing in the handles and placing the doors in their tracks. And voila! We really love how this turned out.
It definitely took longer than a day.
Yes. On the bright side, Daniel now knows what a chevron is.
So if you like what Daniel learned, feel free to like, subscribe, ring the bell, and check out our list of materials down below.
And if you're not watching this on our website, head over to justmydiy.com for more tips, tutorials, backstories, and more. Until next time, thanks for watching.